Employees of Reddit, what's the most fricked up thing you've caught your boss doing at work? NSW. A co-worker put up a webcam pointing toward our executive manager's office because he kept his door closed when he didn't want to be interrupted, and a lot of us got tired of walking wide down to the other end of the floor to see if he was in and available or not. The camera was camouflaged because, well, there was camo netting above the cube where it resided. It also saved the stream to a connected server, something like a week's worth. That was just how the co-worker set it up. The executive clearly did not know about the camera, as it caught him banging a mid-level manager on his desk one night. Door open, lights on and all. News and screen caps of this got around, of course, and quickly. When the executive found out there was a webcam, he went over and ripped it out. For several weeks you could point your browser to the cam and see the last captured image. The red, enraged, bulging-eyed face of this guy right before the camera was ripped out. I work at a company that develops racing engines. Once I was in a technical meeting with my boss, company owner, and another colleague. My boss, behind his desk, suddenly stands up and begins trying to take something from his back pocket that seems stuck. While doing that, he kept explaining some technical subject about the process of using liquid nitrogen to assemble valve seats to a Porsche's engine heads. What I began realizing after a few milliseconds is that he was trying to get something from inside his pants. He takes out a piece of folded toilet paper with a big crap stain on it, analyzes it before throwing it out in the bin. Me and my colleague start laughing beyond the ability to make laugh sounds, while he says, "Man, I really needed to send some emails and make some phone calls. I didn't have time to wipe my butt as it was taking forever, so I made myself a shitpud to get back to work." The meeting was over. We just couldn't concentrate anymore. You just can't find that kind of dedication anymore. A friend caught my boss late at night just standing in front of a fan poking it with a pencil. Not exactly messed up, but it was pretty hilarious. My former boss watched a ton of pee on the computer that I had to use every day for work. He has almost no clue how to use a computer and never cleared the history. A few times he even left a couple of pee sites open. I was constantly cleaning the keyboard, mouse, and desk after I found out. When he was away from the store, my co-workers and I would go through the history and read the titles of what he had been watching. That was quite amusing. Also, the boss was having an affair. He has been married to the same woman for like 20 something years with a lady I actually knew as a regular customer. Co-worker and I caught them going at it in the back room after closing time, and the boss didn't deny anything and said it has been going on for years. After I heard this, I realized that she never really bought anything and he was always giving her stuff. Every time I see his wife I feel bad and wonder if she has any clue that he is fricking someone else. Oh, and until I worked there I was a somewhat sheltered, homeschooled girl that had just graduated from high school, so that was a very eye-opening experience for me. I once walked into my boss' office and saw his wife on top of his desk doing what was basically a striptease. It's probably worth mentioning that I work for my dad. Thanks, Mom. You. I was working for a retail company that was going out of business. I was driving past my work after dinner late one night. I saw lights on in the receiving area, so I slowed down and drove into the parking lot. I witnessed our store manager, my boss, and my assistant sales manager, my assistant, loading TVs, laptops, and boxes into a U-Haul. The next day I went to HR and gave my notice. A few months later, I talked to our former operations manager, and she explained to me we would all receive a bonus check for being rated in the top 10 stores in shrink prevention during the closure of the store, which makes me wonder how much theft was going on in the company. This sounds like Circuit City. I worked at Burrito Place in college for a while. A buddy worked there as a shift manager. I loved it. We actually prepared everything, nothing was from a bag ready to go. Anyway, I got into a car accident. I had insurance. I had a spare car from my parents to drive. I needed nothing other than my paycheck for working. I lived at home while I went to school. I get called in on my day off for a meeting right after the accident. Store manager tells me she knows I am stealing from the register and it is because I need money to fix my wrecked car. I am 18 and the oldest 19 and I do not even have the words to stick up for myself. I am a hard worker and don't buck the system often. I don't even remember leaving. I was crushed. A few weeks later I am at a get together and my buddy that I worked with shows up. He tells me the store manager was fired for stealing from the register. Owners installed cameras and did not tell anyone. Wonder how many she fired to cover it up. That is probably the most fricked up thing to happen to me as an employee. Dude. I work at McDonald's and I have seen my boss snort enough Coke to fill a small cup. See, not little Coca-Cola. I prefer a small cup of Sprite. I didn't catch him. The FBI did. But hey, whatever. When I was a 16-year-old pimply-faced computer sales rep, I had a sales manager whose favorite tactic for closing big sales was letting customers steal stuff. He would tell them he'd throw in the product, then write it off as stolen. At any rate, he found out that he was under investigation by the company, waited until Black Friday, then skipped the state with around $50K from the safe. CompuServe was such a fricked up company, from the top down. In ways I miss it, but all the bulls and fricked up culture they had. Not so much caught him, I guess. Christmas dinner party with the company ends with a trip through the town's bars. Boss ends up super drunk. Tell him he needs to go home but he doesn't want to. So a couple of us drag him out and start walking him over to a cab. On the way he spits on backs of so many people. I can't believe no one noticed and started a fight. Just when we're about to get a cab, he starts pee on a police car. We drag him over to a wall where he continues. And as two girls walk past him he turns around with this huge grin and pisses on them. So I guess you could say it was a great Christmas party. I saw my boss actually working once. Blowing Coke off the counter where we made sandwiches at the pizza place I worked at. My boss was surprised to see me at first, but then asked if I wanted a line. It wasn't so much fricked up as it was hilarious. I used to work at a Ford dealership and we had a really big snowstorm one weekend, so the whole staff was helping clear the snow. Our manager was a complete douche and didn't trust anyone but himself to operate the plow truck. After plowing into two new Focuses and an F-150, gashing holes in the aluminum and ripping off a bumper, he finally let one of the mechanics drive. His eyes were covered by his ego. I used to work retail and my manager loved to disappear and leave me in the store by myself while she took care of personal business. One day she goes to take her break and says she's going to Popeyes across the hall. I ring about 3 customers up and my store empties, so I turn around to face outside. I see my manager sneaking outside. I see her 8 hours later, 3 hours after I was supposed to get off. She went to pick up her daughter from school, drop her off at her mother's house, go to the bank and stop to get more food. Later that night, while I was closing the store, she tried to steal the bank deposit while I was right there beside her. Didn't actually catch him in the act, thank God, but my morbidly obese manager at a well-known thrift store chain used to wipe his butt with towels he'd take off the rack and bring into the bathroom with him. I guess he couldn't reach back there, so he'd hold it like a jump rope and go to town on himself, then leave the poor beshited second-hand towel in the trash can. Beshited classic. Used to be a preschool teacher, now I work in counseling special ed. One day at my old school the entire staff was called to an emergency meeting where we were informed that a male TA had been physically shaming little girls for the past few months. The director of the school apparently knew for some time and did not report him because she did not want to go to court and potentially damage her reputation by employing a diddler. Instead she just made sure he was never alone with kids and kept him employed until one brave girl came forward. He is in prison for 4 counts of child physical shaming and 17 counts of child endangerment for exposing the rest of the class to his evil. He will be in prison for the majority of his remaining life. Director resigned, managed to play stupid and avoided jail time, but as a result her reputation was ruined and is still out of work. Karma is a bee and so was she. I once wondered what would happen if a child came forward with something like that while still at school. I'd like to imagine a lynching. I would see red if someone did that to one of my students. A few of us noticed that one of our managers at a fast food restaurant was leaving early quite a lot. This was strange because she usually would stay late or work double shifts to help pay for her exuberant nightlife. We checked the time clock punch corrections, and sure enough, She was correcting her punches so that she was working until 5:03 or 4:57 instead of 11:30 am or 12 pm like she actually was. We went to the owner and she wasn't fired, but she was demoted to a minimum wage position, so she quit. Sitting on the back table, grabbing her tea and telling me to play with her boobs while I was trying to cook the chicken before we opened. Cook the chicken. So that's what the kids are calling it these days. We have a bunch of mannequins spread throughout our shop with lingerie on them and whatnot. In the back, thrown almost haphazardly all around are the spare parts. Legs thrown on the left, head stacked on tables and crap like that. Well, once, I crap you not, I went to the back to act like I was looking in our non-existent stockroom for a seller that a customer just had to have, and when I got back there I saw my then manager, now ex-manager, using a spare mannequin arm to finger herself. We had a quick laugh and then I went out and told the woman we were out of that specific vibe. But we do have a few alternatives that could tickle your fancy. My manager will swear by them. When I used to work at an Albertsons grocery store, I saw my manager fricking his girlfriend in the back office. He always used to say he was an butt man, which was weird because I wasn't asking, but he was fricking her in the butt. Cool. I had an Albanian boss who would drink and smoke while making pizza in the dining room of the restaurant. Was legal at the time. He would stand there with a soda cup full of vodka and a cigarette burning in the ashtray and make pizza non-stop. Never heard a customer say a word. Also, we smoked weed cigs in the kitchen non-stop. No one was paid on the books. He didn't pay taxes on anything and had a deal worked out with the liquor store down the street that us 16-year-old delivery drivers could go buy his and our booze. It was my first day at work at my first job ever. My boss was a quiet voice bodybuilder who came up to me and said, "Hey, hold down the fort. My friend and I have to go kick somebody's butt. Be back in 20 minutes. Peter is here with you." Peter, roughly 15 seconds later, was explained what was going on and screamed, "Frick that, I'm going with you," and jumped over the counter, and I was, on my first day of work, left in charge for 3 hours. And the dude had the nerve to try and fire me for the things I fricked up. That got sorted very quickly. This manager, we'll call him Jason, because that was his name, was notorious for being a stickler for the rules. 5 minutes late logging in more than once, it's write up time. 7 minutes late getting back from lunch because traffic in Mason, Ohio anytime between 7 am and 8 pm can suck a fat dong. It's write up time, baby. Anyway, after I left the department, a temp who had worked there on and off for like 20 years was having some health issues. She apparently had a mini stroke at her cubicle and hit the ground. I hear that as she was being wheeled out by paramedics, the manager chased after her telling her she was going to be written up for leaving work early. Can confirm. Traffic in Mason is terrible. Sounds like my old crappy boss too. Boss asked me to clean up his computer. He sucks at organization. Came across a file of some hardcore pee, like some Sarah Sally sick crap. Moved into a file called personal and tried to forget about it. The next day was my 21st day and he knew I was going to Vegas. He gave me $100 bill and said thanks for not saying anything to anyone. Have fun in Vegas. You owe him that $100 back now. Years ago in the pet store I work, the manager, that since has been made unemployed, cut the leg off a budgie because it had trapped it in some wire mesh. She could have just cut through the mesh, right? I walked into his office and he was busy on his computer. I saw him playing Freesall through the window before I walked in, so when I entered his office he quickly closed it, revealing some P-site. I told him I'll come back later. How one time my boss walked in while I was on ESPN.com. I minimized it so fast I am pretty sure he thought it was pee. I should have left it up. I even knew he wouldn't care. I once caught my boss, McDonald's manager, make a burger, proceed to take it into his office, and 10 minutes later when I needed to confirm a $100 bill with him, I walked in on him fricking it. I quit a week later. He sure was loving it. When I was an assistant manager for a particular video store chain, we had an employee who regularly stole, was belligerent, never did his work, and a myriad of other general shat things to do. I kept writing him up for his behavior and finally, he'd done enough to merit a termination. I was filling out the paperwork prior to doing so. as it had to be reviewed. He went through the manager's drawers in the back and found the form, and in front of a customer, started screaming and swearing at me about it, and making personal comments about me in front of the customer, before storming out. I hadn't been aware, but my boss had become friends with him out of work. She took the termination form, and his entire employee file home for safekeeping and then lost it. A month later, she fired me for being out of uniform on Thanksgiving. Ugh, it's incredible after all this time there is still so many, well, idiots, douches and complete buttholes around. You'd think evolution would give a better average intelligence. Well, okay, society plays a big part, I know. I used to work at a wedding event place. A co-worker told me that one night she forgot her purse and walked back into the, supposedly empty, main banquet hall after a wedding to the sounds of loud, angry freaking. When she turned the corner, our boss, the owner, was sitting in the middle of a completely empty room, pants at his ankles, jerking it to pee that was being displayed on the projector, the one that is normally used to show the wedding picture montage for just married couples at the reception. Also, he was 350 plus lbs and had a plate of that night's hors d'oeuvres sitting next to him, bacon wrapped sausages, crab cakes, and cheese and crackers. He saw her, and she just stopped and left. No purse for that night. To be honest, that sounds like an amazing way to jack off. My boss mother, she was pretty much the boss, really, worked for him doing front desk work, and they had this weird relationship. She is the helicopter parent that never quit. Anyway, the list of things that she did during my short time there were, when hearing I was a vegetarian, checking my food in the fridge, my co-worker caught her picking through my chili with a fork, and once when I walked in eating a burrito shrieked, "I see chicken." Aha. Once, when the trains were down, my dad gave me a lift to work. I walked in and she said, "Oh, I didn't know you were half Muslim." Then all day told all customers, BTW, I worked in a very, very small town, until I finally asked her where she got that idea from. She said she saw my dad dropping me off and that he was an Arab. I told her he was about as white as paper, but she insisted, telling me the next day that she saw him down the street wearing a turban. Every male customer that came in, she insisted was my boyfriend and that I was just trying to get out of doing work by chatting to the latest on the list. Apparently here, "I will help you carry that," to a bloke in a wheelchair, was considered licentious and inappropriate. She also thought I was an alcoholic, because I bought beer, once, and my favorite, when she broke the water cooler thing, blamed it on me even though I was on the opposite side of the room, got her son involved, demanding I pay for it, and when I finally said that I am going to get WorkSafe involved, snuck into the back room and attempted to steal my purse. A co-worker had to get involved with that. So, not really fricked up, just the fricking weirdest place. If you ask me, her trying to steal your purse is pretty messed up. I was a cook in a middle school. My first day on the job, I spilled about 40 meatballs on the floor. Mind you, I had to make about 8,000. This is not an exaggeration. My boss sees me throwing them out and yells, "What are you doing? You can't throw all those out." He then proceeded to pick them up off the floor, put them back onto the sheet pan, and cook them. He served them to children. After that vomit-inducing first day, his behavior continued with bread products, cooked meatballs, chicken nuggets, and most vegetables. I have never seen him wear gloves in the kitchen, a health and sanitation requirement, even with foods like mashed potatoes and tuna, which pick up flavors from everything they touch. I am eternally grateful that I am now a cook in a high school, not that middle school. I was working for a software company many years ago, 2001. My boss had a software company that was bought by our company. He was retained as a VP of who knows what. Once he made his money, he really didn't give a crap. For some reason he got into P. And no, not watching, producing. Anyways, for months he used to come to work, sit at his desk and edit the videos. This was an open office environment so we could all see. I thought it was funny, others not so much. And now we can later rest the whole P on the office computer category. You win. I worked for a startup a few years ago. The owners were brothers-in-law who were former real estate assessment specialists. They were rolling in the cash. Come Christmas time, They organize the company Christmas party. They have everyone in the company, about 20 employees, drive to a place that is around an hour away from where our actual office building is. Place is a complete freaking dive. The food is crap. Christmas toast time. One of the dipshits stands up, quite inebriated. Well, it's Christmas time. Other owner and I were gonna give y'all $500 bucks but decided not to. Seeing his stupid freaking face after hearing him say that with his drunk crap Billy accent. He thought he was so clever. Here we are. 2 hours worth of gas out, a $6 meal that tasted like crap, and a joke about how they were going to give us a $500 bonus but decided on nothing instead. Okay. I was working at Starbucks. The assistant manager was being berated about the quality of a drink by some old rich bee. He happily says that he will remake it, heats up the milk to around 95 degrees, pours it in the cup about 2/3 of the way, takes it in the back room, and dips his dong in it. Then he finishes heating it up, adds espresso and handed it to her with a smile. I was equally horrified and liberated. TLDR. Apparently my assistant manager was Tyler Durden. I was thinking in Celsius and this post terrified me. I worked for a real piece of crap that once tried to get me to be his wingman so he could hit on girls half his age at a college bar. He was married and had 2 daughters, which made it extra creepy. He was cheating on his wife. Anyway, one day at work we found nudes of him in a chef folder on the company network. Honorable mention. Former boss who got me laid off was later caught embezzling everyone's bonus money. When they searched his computer they found chili pea. Worked at a sports bar for a Pakistani dude who fricked strippers and prostitutes in his office, connected to the kitchen, at least once or twice a day. Also, worked at a pizza place where women could show their teeth for pizza and had my boss come in on his day off to get pizza and smoke DMT in the freezer. A freezer is a terrible place to do DMT, like almost as bad in public. When I worked for mailboxes etc, now the UPS store, back in the day my boss was this huge stinky bee who complained constantly about her allergies yet reeked of mothballs and mold. Anyway, we used to package and ship crazy stuff all of the time like telescopes and vacuum machinery, and she was so cheap she skimped on the bubble wrap, peanuts, etc. One time a customer came in with the hood to some old car he had been trying to restore forever. Apparently it was near impossible to find an original in good condition. So when he finally found one he paid through the nose for it, and obviously needed it to get safely home. My boss charged him a ridiculous amount of money to pack and send the thing back to this dude's home shop or whatever, but she didn't want to spend the money on putting it in a crate. So she wrapped it in bubble wrap and cardboard and called it a day. The hood got all dented up in transit, and she tried to blame it on UPS. They said they weren't liable since it was packed poorly, so she tried to blame my co-worker for it. Obviously neither of us had wanted to mess with the thing and let our boss do it since she was an expert. So my co-worker was extra pee when this bee started yelling at her. She quit not long after. In high school I worked in store in the mall. We had a small office stockroom in the back with our own bathroom. After closing my boss was doing paperwork or whatever in the back, and I guess he assumed everyone left. He went to take a dump and didn't bother closing either the stockroom door or the bathroom door. That was when I learned my boss is one of those guys who craps completely naked. But his shoes. I worked at a restaurant and my boss actually headbutted a customer who was being very rude to the kitchen staff of this restaurant. It happened in the manager's office. He brought him back there after the customer clearly couldn't control his anger. Although I didn't see it, I was at the front of the restaurant and it happened in the back. I had to stay late to detail what I saw experienced in a police report. What a fun day. The guy actually kept his job, believe it or not. This is the first fricked up thing I feel conflicted about. He was wrong legally, but I can't help but feel okay with this. My boss is kind of a backwoods lady from Kentucky. One time we had a lesbian customer. When the lady left my boss said, "Did you all see the dike? Yeah, it's out back holding all the water back." I found out my boss had a separate email account for soliciting escorts. He still used AOL at the time and I easily gained access to his account info. I would routinely check his H-mail to find out when he'd be out of the office so I could get real work done. I wonder if he ever noticed the smirk on my face when he'd tell me he was off to a doctor's appointment. I love that you used your secret knowledge to be more productive. He was on the phone. He opened a drawer on his desk, taking out a small bottle with white powder in it. Then he snorted a 2 inches line of C while he was still on the phone. And it was not during the 80s and I was not working in a bank. Well, he came out front to make a sandwich without wearing gloves. It's not unlikely that moments before he was masturbating to Korean soap operas. He does that pretty often. Not my boss, but caught my English teacher watching hardcore P in high school. He pretty much gave me a get out of jail free card for the rest of the year. If I had found my English teacher doing this I would just say, look, I don't do crap and pass, then nobody ever finds out. His reaction was weird. Way back in the day, boss got a P spam in his email. HTML content, big pics of a naked woman. Not a big deal, right? Just delete and move on with your life. He's a fundamentalist Christian and pretty much a poster child for prude. He yells out from his office, whoa, and starts to laugh nervously. 3 of us run in there, thinking something's wrong. Instead, he's trying to cover the screen with his hands while trying to click the delete button with, well, his elbow, I guess, since his hands were occupied. Instead of spending a half second deleting it, he spent at least 10 seconds trying not to see it, including the 3 to 5 seconds it took us to get from our desks to his office. We got there, and he was still trying to delete it, while laughing and turning bright red. Eventually, he got it deleted, but not before all of us saw some naked breasts on his screen. We left, just shaking our heads at him. Once walked in on my supervisor receiving a BJ from one of the waitresses. Worth mentioning I worked in a family-friendly, kid-orientated restaurant. The worst thing is that she'd been obsessing over him for months and months, but she was very young and he was older and engaged, so we all brushed it off as her reading more into the situation than was really there. He let everyone think of her as a delusional little girl for months to save his own reputation. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.